Hello and welcome to India's World. In Myanmar, the opposition National League for Democracy, NLD, led by Aung San Suu Kyi, has won an absolute majority in the general election held on November 8th. At the last count, the NLD had won 378 seats in the lower and the upper houses of parliament combined. The party needed only 329 seats to cross the halfway mark to gain a majority. The results for some of the seats are yet to be announced, so this tally can go up even further. The military-backed ruling party, the Union Solidarity and Development Party, USDP, has been washed out with less than 50 seats. When the NLD government is formed in January, it will be the first time since 1962 that the army will not be in direct control of the government. Aung San Suu Kyi's new party now has enough numbers in both houses of parliament to elect the next president in March 2016. However, Suu Kyi herself has been banned from contesting because of a constitutional provision. The military will still retain substantial powers. The ministers for Defence, Home and Border Affairs are appointed by the army. 25% seats are still reserved for serving army officers in parliament. The police also reports to the army in Myanmar. To discuss the challenges that democracy faces and its future in Myanmar, we have with us three former Indian ambassadors to Myanmar. We have with us Ambassador V.S. Seshadri, currently Vice Chairman of Research and Information Systems for Developing Countries, RIS in New Delhi. He's been India's ambassador to Slovenia and to Myanmar. We have with us Ambassador Vivek Katju. He retired as Secretary in the Ministry of External Affairs and was India's ambassador to Afghanistan, Thailand and Myanmar. We have with us Ambassador Preet Malik. He has served as Indian High Commissioner to Singapore, Tanzania, Seychelles, Malaysia and Brunei, and India's ambassador to Bahrain, Cuba and Myanmar. I welcome you gentlemen to this discussion. Ambassador Seshadri, let me begin with you. Would you say that these elections mark a watershed in Myanmar's political evolution? And if yes, why?
They certainly mark a watershed, and it's a stunning victory of over 80% of the seats, and by NLD all by itself. In some ways, it is not surprising, because every time NLD has been a candidate in the elections in 1990, in the by-elections during 2012, and now NLD has won very handsomely. And I think this is certainly to a large extent due to the expectations, the love, the support that the people of Myanmar have for Aung San Suu Kyi. Now, there were some doubts. Some observers were wondering whether they would indeed score such a big win this time. But I think there are 2 or 3 reasons for that. One is that there was an expectation that maybe the USDP government, the last 5 years' record, it had done reasonably well in terms of bringing in political reforms, economic reforms, etc. So there was a feeling that maybe there will be some support that will be gathered by them. Secondly, there is the religious right, the certain extreme Buddhist clergy who had been campaigning, and NLD was not supportive of the 3 or 4 legislative bills that were passed in the parliament recently, and they were not very keen to be supportive of NLD. The third element was this time, unlike 1990, she didn't go along with the ethnic parties in the form of a coalition. So there was a feeling that maybe in some of the ethnic states, NLD may not do so well, but she has belied all those expectations.
Okay. Vivek, now after this stunning electoral victory, what can the NLD achieve, NLD government when it is formed? What can it achieve given its limited constitutional powers?
I think there is a hierarchical system in place under the present constitution. I don't see the NLD going for any confrontation with the army. That chapter is over. And therefore, it will move to remove the last vestiges of Burma's isolationism and take Burma out fully into the modern world, into the globalized world. It is amazing that even though Aung San Suu Kyi was isolated and was kept in this confinement, yet she is fully aware of what has happened in the world. She has kept herself abreast with a radio, perhaps, as she once said, but she is aware of the need to take Myanmar forward very, very rapidly.
Okay. Ambassador Malik, do you think Suu Kyi can use her parliamentary victory to argue for amending the constitution, for example, and removing the 25% seats for serving military officers, or amend the constitution so that after a few years she herself becomes eligible for contesting as president?
Well, given the circumstances that led to the development of this particular constitution of 2008, amending it is not an easy job. It requires a complete support from the armed forces. And it would therefore only be possible if she is able to strike an effective cooperative relationship with the armed forces. She's done the right beginning towards that by saying that she would consult with all her peers within the system. It will have to be seen whether the methodology that she has already stated she's going to adopt of running the government without being in effective executive control of it because of the constitutional problems, whether she is able to maintain that cooperative spirit, and whether there is an effective enough effort on her part to bring all the people in. Let's not forget that there is a major problem where the ethnic community.
We're going to discuss that in a while. But let me just quickly ask you before we close this segment, what would need to happen for Myanmar to be transformed from the so-called disciplined democracy, as the army likes to call it, to becoming a democracy without any prefixes?
I think the campaign theme of NLD is time for change. And there were two broad elements that she focused upon. One is rule of law, because she sincerely believes that there is a lot that needs to be done to align the country's administration of justice that is acceptable as worldwide.
And the second thing?
The second theme that she has mentioned is change. Now, presumably this is a constitutional change. So she will certainly work for it, and she has already shot off a letter to the president, to the chief of armed forces,
offering them a dialogue,
asking for a dialogue, for reconciliation, and for maintaining tranquility during the period till the transition is over.
Okay, we need to take a break at this point. We'll be back again with this interesting discussion in a bit. Stay with us. Welcome back. We're discussing the historic elections in Myanmar. Vivek, you wanted to say something before we went on the break.
In my view, the prefix cannot be dropped without the agreement of the army. They hold the key to this.
Okay. Ambassador Malik, what were the domestic and international reasons that compelled the army or encouraged the army to go along with democratic transition?
Two things. One was that the over-dependence on China had become an issue, and they needed to open up to the world. And the only way they could do that was to ensure that, that what the world wanted, the move towards democracy, commenced. The second thing, to my mind, was the fact that even within the armed forces, there has been some kind of a change. They have established their own authority, and they were willing to go ahead with some kind of sharing. And that is now being reflected in the fact.
So you're saying it's a confident army that went for democratic transition,
Precisely.
and not an army that was compelled by circumstances and which reluctantly then went ahead?
No, I wouldn't say that it was reluctant, because that wouldn't have been possible. You wouldn't have seen the sort of things that did happen when Thein Sein started opening up. So it is obvious that they had given clear thought. And so there was a desire now to move away from the purely authoritarian system that the armed forces had.
Vivek, to what extent do you think that these election results would chasten the army? After all, they've been used to ruling since 1962, and now suddenly there's a prospect of large part of that power being taken away.
I think the army is conscious that it has to move on. So therefore, the decision it has taken in Myanmar is to control the security apparatus of state and the coercive apparatus of state entirely.
Oh, but also parliament, because the 25% army contingent there is all of young officers, not one above the level of a major. They're all captains, majors.
But that is an assurance to keep this control in their hands.
Okay.
That, to my mind, is the principal motivating factor. Now, last point. The army is not totally isolated today. It is realizing that the world is moved on, that there is the digital age.
Yeah.
And it can't keep Myanmar completely in the shadows forever.
Okay, so quickly, sir, because I want to move on to something else.
No, sure. No, just one point. The armed forces are fully secured, including the 25% of this, the legislative responsibility. More important is the fact that at any time they feel that their rights are under stress, they can declare an emergency.
Like they did in 1990. But, Master Seshadri, after the complete sweep of the elections, Aung San Suu Kyi wrote this letter which you referred to President Thein Sein and offered national reconciliation type talks with the president and with the army chief. Now, why is it that the idea of national reconciliation refers only to reconciliation with the army? Or do you think it also includes reconciliation with the various ethnic nationalities of Burma? After all, there are 16 insurgencies going on in that country, if not more.
I think it is beyond maintaining good relations with the army. But I would only like to add one point on the earlier issue. I think the change came because of a strong impulse from within that when Myanmar was seeing countries like Laos, Cambodia moving ahead, and they were having still be called as the least developed country.
Within ASEAN.
Within ASEAN. I think there was a perception that this is time to change and move towards development. While they were able to maintain law and order, but in terms of moving ahead on development, the armed regime had limitations.
Okay, but on reconciliation?
Now, on reconciliation, I think Aung San Suu Kyi, even earlier this year, had been calling for this meeting of the top four. It was denied at that time, but presumably now...
By top four, you mean the three army generals?
No, the top four is the president, the speaker of the combined houses, then the armed forces chief, and the NLD chief.
Okay.
Now that she has got this huge mandate, presumably the meeting will take place. And she has said it is meant for discussing reconciliation as well as maintaining tranquility during this period.
No, but I was saying reconciliation also needs to be there with the ethnic minorities. Let me take that question to Vivek.
Yeah.
So, Vivek, do you think she has it in her to offer something to the ethnic minorities? Because the army itself had started a process of reconciliation, set up a high-level committee, they had signed ceasefires with some of them, except for the Karens, I think, Kachins, they had signed some kind of arrangements with them. Will she carry that process forward? Is she capable of it?
Not by herself. She has to take the army along. But let's not forget that the army is a national army of Myanmar, but it is also the final authority that backs the Burmese ethnic group. Historically, the Burmese ethnic group has always felt itself to be under siege. And she herself is the daughter of Aung San. She is an ethnic Burmese, even though her mother was a Karen.
Yeah, but hold on. I would hate to interrupt you, but her father, Aung San, after all, signed the Panglong agreement, informal talks, and offered not only autonomy, but except for the Kachins, so the Karens and the Shans, he offered secession and said that we will have such a federal constitution and will ensure that you would not want secession, but it is your right. Kachins were not given it because they are spread over a large area. Certainly Karens were given the right, but Kachins were not given. Karens, is it? I stand correct.
But you are correct. And that has been the dilemma always. But the Burmese, because of the past and also because of the experience during British colonialism, will, in my mind, be very, very wary of any reconciliation process where they will lose primacy and the army will simply not accept it.
So, do you agree with him? How can the majority Burmans lose primacy in a country that used to be called Burma and called Myanmar? And if that were the case, why would the army begin the process of reconciliation, offering greater autonomy to the 8 nationalities?
Well, I agree almost entirely, but one element that you should keep in mind, and all of us should keep in mind, is the fact that the right to secede, which was a very important part of the Panglong Agreement and was reflected in the 1947 Constitution, though not exactly in the manner in which it has now gone completely. The present Constitution makes it quite clear that there is no right to secede. That's one side of it. So when you say that the ultimate solution with the ethnic community will take place on the basis of the spirit of the Panglong Agreement, one very specific area is out.
Okay.
That's one side of it. The second part of it is this, and this answers the question that you had raised right in the beginning. The colonial period saw an effective disenfranchisement from all aspects as far as the Burman community was concerned. And it was the ethnics, some of the ethnics, and the Indians who were brought into that entire sort of what you would call the security system, the law and order maintenance system, and also the administrative system.
Okay. So, it's not going to be easy.
It's not going to be easy.
Okay. I'll come back to you, sir. But we need to take a break at this point. We'll be back again with this interesting discussion in a bit. Stay with us. Don't go away. Welcome back. We're discussing the historic elections in Myanmar. Seshadri, do you think this stupendous victory will lead the NLD to actually even settle with the Rohingyas? And what could be the possible settlement with the Rohingyas who are Muslims? And how would it impact the core support of the NLD, that is Buddhist Burmans or Burmans?
I think this is an issue where she will have to tread with great care.
Well, she has been already.
And she has been very careful while responding to questions on this score.
And lost luster because of that, lost stature because of that internationally.
And you also have to recognize that in this election, from that particular region, it is the Rakhine Party, not NLD, which has been returned.
Sorry to interrupt, but by disenfranchising the Rohingyas who have voted in past elections but
Yes,
were not allowed to vote in this election. So if you
even
don't
NL
allow a huge section to vote, obviously those who are in the field will win.
Even NLD, out of the 1,000-odd candidates that it had put up, there is not one Muslim. That is because initially when they had put up a few candidates, they were rejected by the Election Commission. So they didn't want to go through this process. But she is committed to bringing peace, having an inclusive society. And I think she will try, but in due course of time.
Okay, so let's move on to what a democratic Myanmar means for India. Do you think, Vivek, that Indian policy towards Myanmar, for most part, has flip-flopped? Sometimes we support democratic forces and give the Nehru Peace Award to Aung San Suu Kyi. Then we find, oh, the Chinese are making inroads, they've come to Coco Island, so we quickly sort of sue for peace with the army. And then when we see democracy is coming in again, we are again cultivating the democratic forces.
Look, we've pursued, and Mr. Malik has been one of the architects of
the
that policy. No, of the realistic policy. Of the realistic policy towards Myanmar. Myanmar is a neighbor. We cannot have the luxury of being idealistic. And I think Aung San Suu Kyi realizes this. We kept lines of communication open with her at all times. But you have to accept the fact that you had a neighbor which was controlled by the army, which had a certain set of policies. You could not then try to erode them, but you had to deal with them. As the Americans say, engage them. Okay. And that is what we did. Right. And I think pursuit of national interest is the very core of all diplomatic endeavor.
Okay, that's motherhood and apple pie, of course.
Absolutely, but we often forget it. Our idealists forget this.
Okay, all right. Mr. Malik, despite our tall talk about look east and act east, would you agree that India's presence in Myanmar is bare minimum? Our transportation links are virtually non-existent. There's just a bi-weekly flight for Buddhist pilgrims, really, Gaya, Calcutta, Yangon. That also sometimes doesn't run. There are no passenger shipping links. The road from Moreh to Mandalay is in very bad shape. It takes 24 hours to reach Mandalay, and for the same distance, if you go Mandalay to Ruili to Chinese border, it takes 8 hours. Our cultural links have atrophied. The only thing we encourage is Buddhist pilgrimage. Why are we doing this? What are we waiting and watching for?
I think there is a historical reason for that. We have had a problem with being as open with whoever is in power in Myanmar as we should with a neighboring country. While UNU was Prime Minister, there was a fair amount of, I would say, a very effective relationship.
Before 1962?
Before 1960.
60.
I would say up to 1960. Thereafter, once Nevin took over, things started going wrong. There was always a hesitation on our part. We needed them from the security angle because of our own problems in the northeast and the space that they got in Burma and now Myanmar. But at the same time, we were never able to sort of go beyond just the security element to the extent that it required. We should also keep in mind the fact that during the entire Nevin period, Burma was in a kind of an isolationist mood or mode, and he destroyed the economy of that country. That is when Burma became one of the LCD countries in the globally recognized as such. I think till 1992, from 1962 to 1992, so you're talking of a 30-year period, there were only two elements that seemed to govern the relationship. One was the security angle, and the other was the China angle.
Okay.
Nothing more than that.
But let me take the security question to you, Mr. Seshadri. Why does India see Myanmar only for the security angle? Either the Chinese are fighting for space with us there, or we see it as a safe haven for Indian northeastern insurgents. Why don't we do anything else? Why don't we see it as a business opportunity? Why are we not setting up hospitals there, schools, colleges, universities, pharmaceutical production facilities? We even sell them drugs in strips, not even in bulk. And they complain. Indian hospitals have patient collection centers in Yangon, but they would not set up a hospital there. Why is this hesitation to invest and engage with Myanmar?
I'm not sure if I can accept the presumption in your question.
Go on.
Because during the last 4-5 years that I am more aware of, but I think the ambassadors who preceded me there as well have done a tremendous amount of work in terms of capacity building. For example, we are perhaps the only country offering 500 ITEC slots to Myanmar. And
that is for technical training.
Pardon?
That is for technical training.
That is for capacity building, human resource development.
Okay.
We have also set up a number of training centers on English language, entrepreneurship development, on ITIs, machine tools, training on working on machine tools, etc. We are now setting up a large IT university in Mandalay. And on the connectivity front, I think we have 3 or 4 rather big projects. You are aware of the Kaladan project. You are aware of the Tamu, Moreh, Kaleba, Mandalay route, which will connect and make part of the Myanmar, Thailand trilateral highway, and also the Reethidim road, which will connect Mizoram with Chin State and with Mandalay. Now, progress on this is underway, but I agree with you that we need to take them forward. And I would also put forward this, that we have the unique opportunity of developing Western Myanmar, which is relatively underdeveloped in Myanmar, and Northeast India, and bring them as a development, see the development of that region as a whole. And a larger economic region will make many things economically viable in terms of trade, in terms of investment, and using these connectivity corridors to have development corridors.
We're really running out of time. Last question to you now. Why is the Indian private sector not going in a big way? And why is the Indian private sector not leveraging the presence of a huge Indian diaspora there? There are people from Tamil Nadu, people from Andhra, Orissa, Bihar, Punjab, Gujarat, Surtis.
No, the Indian diaspora, I think, cannot play much of a role given its nature.
Okay,
But you are right, the Indian private sector needs to take Myanmar far more seriously than it has.
Yeah.
Part of the problem is that Myanmar has not advertised itself well.
Okay. You wanted to say something. We're running out of time.
On
But quickly.
precisely this
Yeah.
point. The private sector in India has not taken notice of the opportunities. All of us at various stages have tried to make them engage. And I think there's a history again involved in that. Don't
62,
forget that
most of them
our
left.
own,
Yeah.
No, all of us are aware of the fact that they targeted the Indian community, which was the business community. And that is not something that goes out of people's minds, that you put in investment. So there has to be a degree of, let's say, involvement of the financial sector with governmental support for the private sector to take the risks that are involved. Some are doing it already.
Okay,
as
so,
you
but
know.
we have run out of time. I'd like to thank all of you, Ambassador Preet, Malik, Ambassador Vivek, Katju, Ambassador Seshadri, for participating in this discussion. That is all we have for you today. We'll be back again as usual next week. Till then, goodbye and thanks for watching India's World.